Well, good afternoon, everybody in Australia, and good morning to those calling from South Africa and joining us here today. We're going to listen to some of the senior board and management team from Wits Mining, the CEO, Mr. Jaak van Heerden, and Chairman Michael Quinert, who are going to talk to us about the scoping study just recently announced by the company as the company starts moving into production its Witwatersrand Basin Gold Project. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. How are things over there today?
Great. Thanks, Peter.
Well, thanks, Peter.
Good to be with you.
Well, we've got a good audience here today, so we're going to start with a few questions. We're going to start, I think, with you, Michael. You've recently returned from a trip to the site, and I know that you've been pretty important to the progress of the company and getting us to this point. We're about to, which we have started mining and getting to production. So can you give us an overview of how you saw things over there and your view of how things are progressing?
Yeah, Peter, absolutely ecstatic to get there after 2 years sitting on my hands here trying to run things remotely, and getting there a few weeks ago and seeing what Jaak and his team have managed to do in a short period of time since the grant of the mining right was truly was exciting. And I think you say thank you very much for that credit for getting the company to where it is. But I think when I got there, I realised the best decision I made was appointing Jaak as the managing director of this company, because now we have a real mining person and a team that's been moulded into actually making this a real mine. So going from the theoretical, legal, permitting, environmental background, all that stuff, politicking, and actually seeing the mine working and seeing the people there and how enthusiastic they are, that was really the first impression I had, which has been really almost overwhelming. So I'm very excited for what's happening there. I think the team have accomplished a lot in a short time, and people would be amazed. You really don't get it from the pictures we put out about how big and what the scope and scale of this thing is. So being there and seeing it really there's no substitute.
And what's your first-hand view of the operating environment on the ground there? Not only in South Africa, which we sometimes get mixed messages in Australia about, but the operation of the site. Can you give us an overview of how you saw the workforce and the team that we've got there on the ground that's bringing this project into operation?
Yeah, it's a critical issue, especially since one of our big advantages as a project is that we're located very close to a lot of infrastructure and populations for employment, resources and so forth. But that also comes with the other side of it, which is that we need to mine in a responsible way and that's in harmony with our community. So working with our community and stakeholders there has been a critical part of not just the operational start of starting the mine, but developing it in harmony with those people. We've got some very good people doing that, as Jaak would attest to with Tazama, Jaak and others who have been doing that. And I'm seeing there's a good support from the community. I've seen the real evidence of that. We've got a good relationship with the government stakeholders, including people at the Department of Mines, the people at the Department of Water Affairs and the environmental people. And, with our contractors and employees, we can see, there's been a few little hiccups as there always are, but I think we've managed those well. And overwhelmingly, the contractor's very happy. And, our team are working, we've got our own team working in unison with the contractor. And I think things are going very well.
And staging the Witwatersrand Basin project ensures it's de-risked somewhat and I think allowing for the ramp up of all aspects of operations as well as assisting with the financing aspect of the project. Can you walk us through the strategy of staging the process through phases 1 to 4 and beyond, and how that impacts or is beneficial to the funding as well?
Yeah, I think, that's one of the things Jaak and I sat down and talked about for a fair bit when we were planning how this thing would go forward. And one of the things that we have, which is different to a lot of mining operations or projects, is that we have this unique ore body that's in a very predictable, staged fashion. It's different reefs outcropping at different positions that are very predictable. So unlike a situation where you go in and you might have a 5 to 7 year pit life, and then maybe you'll go underground if you do some more drilling, we know we've got a massive resource. So then the question is, how do you unpack this? How do you develop this? And what we did was we thought, well, look, we're small, we've got a big resource, but we don't want people to think we've bitten off more than we can chew. So what we started with, and I think people should keep this in context, You know, the DFS we've done in the subsequent scoping study about how we stage this mine are done on a conservative base case. You know, this is our base case to prove it and make sure we could, you know, Yark tried to beat the mine. Let's see if we can kill it. And we haven't been able to do that. And this is only our base case is what I'm trying to say. And I think the best thing about staging it is it gives us, the first stage is a big chunk of it, and it does lead on to stage 4, where Quaila Shallows lead straight into Quaila Deep. So it's actually, probably in some ways, it's a bit misleading to say it's 4 stages, because the first stage and the fourth stage, which effectively are done in effect together because they're on the same ore body, you know, they probably account for Yark 80 to 90% of the ore at the moment. So, you know, it's not that, but it does give us optionality, you know, in terms of, do we go here, do we go there? And it allows us to operate at different phases at different times. So we're keeping that consistent grade and ore tonnage going through the plants. So that's really what it's about, optionality and flexibility, but the ore body lends itself to that. And I think that was the basic sort of theory behind the way we've planned it. But as I said before, it's very much a base case, and I don't want people to get too sort of, you know, we haven't gone high yet, but we're looking at things as to how we can now optionalize this ore body, and what you're seeing before you is only the beginning.
And probably leading on from that question, it's one that everybody's always asking, that the staged process, is that seen as beneficial from a funding and financing perspective?
I think so, because I mean, doing it in the stage basis means that we can present it as a smaller, you know, opportunity for the banks to sort of test it and make sure we're proving principle on it and our capability of mining. So I think it does enhance that, yes.
Okay, thanks, Michael. We'll come back and we'll talk about the scoping studies with you both. But for Yark, the scoping study was delivered in a record high gold price environment. None of us could have predicted a couple of months ago. And that highlights significant potential for the WBP at these prices. What are the elements of the scoping study that most please you? Operationally, what do you see as the benefits going through from the Quaila Shallows right through the stages, given the scoping study that we've now all been able to see?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I think one of the key items that I was quite pleased with was to see the all-in sustaining cost being quite competitive with what we saw in the feasibility study. So that showed that our initial predictions of you know, we've got a massive ore body and we can mine it cost effectively, you know, as sort of answered our questions. I think that's the first one. And then the second one is that, you know, we've got an operating margin for the whole block that sort of jumps over 50%, you know. So if the gold price are at the current levels where it sits at the moment, you know, so it shows us that we've got a robust project. The work that we're doing in a phased approach to show to people that our Quaila Shallows project is up and running. We producing, well, at the moment, our early mining initiative from it. But, you know, there's a lot more to come, and we can build up the company and we can build up the mine in that fashion. And, you know, and we've just proven that it's a robust project going forward.
And going forward now, with all moving through the portal in the early initiative, it's kicked off smoothly. Is it running to schedule and proceeding as you'd expect at this stage?
I must admit, I'm quite surprised when, you know, you stand there and, as Michael said, you stand there and you look at what the team has accomplished really from November until now. You know, there's a lot of work that took place. You know, that even I sometimes take for granted, that we were able to establish a full workforce, get a mining fleet on site, rehabilitate the box cut and the decline in time, you know. And now that we are moving over into let's say a continuous mining process, you almost now forget about the last 3 months and you focus on what lies ahead with you. So to answer the question, you know, no mining operation ever goes as smooth as it goes on Excel. But I must give credit to the team that's on site. You know, the 1 or 2 operational issues that pops up, you know, the guys were able to deal with it. And I think that's the nature of mining that you sit with, and that's the nature of the people that you also sit with, you know. Yes, you are going to hit poor ground conditions, you know, in isolated areas, and it's the experience of the team to fix it and go forward, you know. So I think we are we are still on track on what we try to achieve. We've had, I think, where we are not struggling a bit, but, we got issues with equipment availability. And I think those are sort of typical things that a management team can resolve. And, now that we've resolved most of it, it's now just really moving forward with the project, getting a daily blast in and, your typical mining metrics that's now kicking in.
Yeah, it's almost like all the hard work's been done, and now we can get into the almost easy part, the operational stuff. Supply chains around the world are a bit strained at the moment. You said you might have had some issues there. You're comfortable, you've got all the long lead items and all the equipment and necessary maintenance equipment now?
Yeah, the one big item that we still, that's out on tender at the moment is our complete mining fleet. Because we've got a we've got a buildup of mining fleet, as we show as per our production profile. We can't go out and buy all the mining fleet immediately, So we have gone out on a tender for that. All the majors have indicated that they're willing to participate in the tender. And now what we've given them is a production schedule, and they are now able to match their fleet requirements or our fleet requirements to our production schedule. And, so that is a process that's ongoing. And, you won't believe it, but most of these equipment manufacturers tells us that there's a 6, 7, 8 month lead time on the delivery of new machines, So what we've done in the interim is we've utilized rental equipment, and, even though we had some availability issues in the beginning, we've now established a very good maintenance crew on that. So the availabilities are looking a lot better than what it was probably about 2 months ago, So now we're sort of taking care of the machines, and these machines will then last us until our permanent fleet is in place.
And on that, Jaak, what is the current mining rate and throughput rate that we're either at or building up towards at the moment?
So as we communicated, we're still in our early mining initiative phase, where we're building up to the 8,000 tons or 5,000 to 8,000 tons a month. Because of the sort of the early blocks that we are able to access. And then our feasibility project, if I can call it like that, the development of the brand new decline, that's sort of going to take us to the deeper blocks. That's also in progress, but we're still ramping up to the 5,000 to 8,000 tons, and we hope to start delivering to our toll treater in the next month or so, that we send the first batch of ore to them.
Okay, let's talk about the scoping study a bit more. The current resource supports a 27-year life of mine, according to the study. Historically, the WBP held a much larger JORC. What's the potential for increasing the current resource, and is there any indication of grade variation across the currently uncertified resource?
Well, as we communicated previously, Peter, that we had probably about a 6,000 hectare prospecting area. And once we got granted the mining right area, that dropped down to about 2,000 hectares. But as we showed, probably about 90% of our total resource sat within the mining right area. So we lost very little when we converted from a prospecting right to a mining right. And the one piece that we saw that we had to cut, or that we lost, if I can call it like that, we immediately reapplied for. And we're now in the process of working with the DMRE, our mines department here in South Africa, to get granted the prospecting permit back. And that will then add quite a significant amount of ounces that we've lost previously. That will then add it back into our resource statement once we've got the prospecting right granted. And in terms of your question about the grade, that's one thing that's very homogeneous along the Kimberley ore body, and that's our main target, is the grade is very consistent. Yes, you've got a couple of pay shoots running through the area that we've identified from historical mining. So we understand the ore body very well. The geological team that we've got appointed on this project also understands the project very well. So I think we've got the technical skills to understand the ore body, and that will just help us in mining forward.
Peter, you're muted.
A couple of other questions coming through. One of the themes of those questions is regarding the historic uranium resource. So is there a current plan to integrate that exploration or recertification while you're looking at the rest of the resource?
Definitely. We've made an announcement where, historically in that area, we've declared an exploration target of about 12 to 16 million pounds of uranium. And that's unfortunately only still at exploration target level. So we're building up plans to put it into to convert that exploration target into a resource. And then also what we are looking at is then to combine the uranium credits with our gold credits that we sit there. And then that will then sort of give new life to what we call our Bird Reef Central project area. And that's a real target that we can almost attack as a standalone project. And that's now the work that we're going forward, and we are looking at options. We're looking at the old drill holes that was done previously, and we're looking to incorporate another couple of holes and then to commence with the exploration program in that area in the near future.
It'll be also exciting given that uranium is enjoying buoyant prices seen now and into the future as gold currently is too, and shareholders would like to hear that there's going to be some focus.
Peter,
yes.
can I add to that people may not remember that area where we're talking about with the uranium, that was in the original scoping study as effectively phase 5 of the development, but we took it out because on its own the gold was a bit marginal. So our scoping study released recently with all the numbers in it doesn't include that area, which is important because it shows you that we're getting a good result without it anyway. And it also has its own distinct ingress points and egress points, so it can be operated as a separate standalone mine, as Jark indicated, and it sort of gives us again that optionality of bringing that in or bringing someone else in on it or whatever in the future. So it's important to understand it's not in the numbers we've released. So taking it out and doing it as a separate project will not affect our numbers because it's not in them at the moment.
A nice addition down the track. And which sort of brings me to the next point. The WBP, with its current resource and historic resource as well, in terms of South African gold mines, if we look at the size of the resource, it's getting up into the top echelon there. And still with a pretty low market cap, there seems to be a lot of opportunity there still unrecognised in the company. What do you think the hurdles are for the market that they see that they're still a little bit reticent and we're not seeing the true value reflected in the company's market cap?
Well, I think, if we all knew how the market functions, we'd probably be all sitting somewhere else at the moment. But it's definitely a lot. Some of it's to do with a perceived, I say perceived, not actual, but a perceived heightened geopolitical risk of South Africa. As I've said before on these webinars, people have been telling me for 16 years that I'm going that it's going to blow up and have a coup the next day. But every other African country seems to do that, but they still attract mining investment. So there is a bit of a, particularly in Australia and I think the US, there's a bit of a negative sentiment, perceived geopolitical risk on South Africa, not so much in the UK. Hopefully we can just keep performing and developing this mine and producing and showing people that, there are a few other companies starting to produce in South Africa a range of commodities that seem to be breaking through that ceiling and showing that it can be done. So I think Jupiter's one, and there's a few others as well. So I think, progressively that's a longer term project, but I think we're getting there slowly. But I think that's basically the reason is that because of that issue, and until we actually show that we're also a mine in development. So historically, if we look at every project going from exploration, all the fizz and bubble of an exploration announcements through to actually that sort of valley of death you go through on the way to production, I think that's affecting us as well. And once people see we actually are in production and it's sustainable, I think that'll mature, the position will become more mature, and people will start to look at it on its returns.
And in that question, I summarised quite a few of the viewers' questions about the price and your view, and I think you've answered that quite well. A number of the questions coming through is regarding the funding. Do you see that progressing? And in terms of the operating nature of the mine at the moment, can you give us a bit of a comment on that?
Yeah, the funding is progressing well. I mean, I think just again, to put it in context, let's remember that these sort of mine funding is a process, not a one or two meetings and you've got it. You know, and you can take. We've had approaches from people on streaming and that we could take, and that would secure it. But I mean, we're trying to get the best deal for shareholders. So that means we're aiming for the best tier one type funding we can get. That's why we went to a DFS. That's why we didn't just keep tapping the equity market. We're looking for proper long-term debt funding. So in that terms, we've engaged, I think, a very reputable group in Torum Capital who are doing a great job. I think their basic position is this mine should work and we'll get the funding, but we're just bringing together all the pieces and making sure that when we do go to our final round of calling for it, we go to the right parties, and that means multiple parties. And we also put our best foot forward. What we don't want to do is go forward and have a few things unfinished in terms of our production profile or finalising our toll treat agreement or whatever it may be, and then have the banks allowed to ask a question, because what you want to go and do is not allow room for any questions. That's the goal, so that the more people ask questions, the more when you come back, they sort of a bit negative on the project. That's it. So we want to make sure we got everything tied up exactly right before we actually push the button on the final round. Obviously, we've had a lot of talks, but I think people should just please sit tight, pull no levers, and stay patient on that. That's a process that we're working on, and we're very confident of a successful outcome.
And given there are some very, very large gold mining operations in South Africa, it's not a new business for the banking industry there to be looking at. They'd be very comfortable with South African gold mining operations, and some of the largest in the world are out there. And just on that, with the all-in sustaining costs, we were talking about them earlier at 1138 at above the 800 metre level. As you said, that's the bulk of the mining operation. With those sort of operating costs in the current and perceived gold environment at the moment, where the price is at $19.50 US today as well, I think, that's got to give you some pretty good encouragement. Does that change, if the price stays at these levels, does that change the operational plan at all?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, as I mentioned in the beginning, having a 1138 all-in sustaining cost here in South Africa makes it a very competitive project for us here in South Africa. Considering it is an underground mine, it's not an open pit, and your underground mines tend to be a bit more expensive than your open pits. But, we sit with a 27-year life of mine. So, you've got to balance that out. And I think if we look at the overall ability of this block, and with the elevated prices, there's a couple of initiatives that we are looking at. One of the ones that we briefly mentioned in our scoping study is what we call our Project 200. And that's really what we view as it's an unconstrained view in terms of, the gold price and access to funding, and see what we can get out of this block. So that's a study that we have now embarked on. And, we'll hopefully be in a position in the next couple of months to announce what we found, and, in that we want to investigate, stressing all the mining areas to its max, maybe looking at the option of adding a plant, and looking at all sort of these scenarios to really maximize this block and see what we can get out, and then luckily this elevated prices allows us that type of flexibility to look at this. But in the short term, our mining plans and our operational plans are exactly the same. We're pushing ahead with our early mining initiative. We're pushing ahead with our Kala Shallows project so that we can get that into operation, show the investment community that we are ready to operate. We've got all the boxes ticked, as they say, and then we can move on to a bigger sort of scope of projects like our Project 200 that we initiated.
And there's a couple of questions here regarding the one of the sort of legal objections submitted locally. Can you give us an update on how that's progressing?
Yeah, it's progressing its way through the system. I mean, what we do know now is, I suppose we're more confident than we've ever been, and we put out some pretty confident statements when it happened because we've seen all their evidence, and their evidence. They've got to put up their evidence on affidavit. They've put up their evidence, and frankly, there's nothing that we can find in there that would give rise to a legal concern about the nature of the appeal. Because I think people need to bear in mind too, this project has been through 2.5 to 3 years of scrutiny by the government. It was approved by the Department of Mining. It was then approved on appeal by the Department of Environment. And it's not like it's been through one or two people. It's been through quite a rigorous process. And the people that are running this action are entitled to do it. The law gives them an entitlement to run these actions. And frankly, we think it's a very narrow band of people. Most of our community, they call themselves communities against mining, but we can find a hell of a lot more people in the area that support the mine. So, to us, it's a narrow band of people that are pretty much, from our perception, politically motivated on a certain agenda that they're on, rather than actually having any basic reason to object to the mine that would, in terms of it infringing any rules or laws or environmental standards. So we're very confident it'll run its course. Obviously, when these things first start, they threaten injunctions and all sorts of things. Well, of course, none of that's happened. So we're able to keep mining. The legislation at least recognises that we keep mining. Eventually, that case will run at some point, unless they withdraw. And if it runs, we're very confident we will win. So that's all we can do. We can't do much more about it. We can't make it go away. But we don't think it's of any real material threat to the project.
Thanks, Michael. That covered that pretty comprehensively. There's a number of questions there which we'll try to get to individually offline, and I recommend anybody contact us at the numbers provided at the bottom of the announcements to send in direct questions. We'll do our best to get to those. In conclusion here, Michael and Jaak, what can shareholders look forward to in the next significant milestones? What can we see in the coming months now that we're into the early mining initiative and the machine is running?
Okay, I'll take this one, Peter. Thanks. We want to continue with our early mining initiative, and as I said, prove to the investment community that we are able to access the block. Put our operational issues aside, and then start operating like a real mine, and then start developing the project. So on a operational point of view, that focus is still there. And then I think from the key thing that we're currently working on is getting our funding in place. As Michael mentioned earlier, that's going to sort of be a big switch for us to switch on our feasibility project. And it's a process that we currently go through. And, that's the one thing that we on a corporate level are also working towards, So I think those are the two key issues that we're focusing on at the moment.
And Michael, just a comment for shareholders, bringing a mine into commencement in this gold price environment, you couldn't wish for anything better.
No, I think so. I think you can't. There's certain things you can control and certain things you can't, Peter. But at the moment, it does seem the stars are aligning in the right, constellation for us in terms of those things we don't control. So hopefully we can bring this thing into production at the right time and finally deliver these shareholders with some real value out of this project, which we've worked long and hard to deliver.
Terrific. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time this morning, Jaak, this afternoon, Michael, and for everybody else that has joined us today. We appreciate your time. As I said, please send in any questions you might have that we didn't cover here today, or we can direct them to you, direct the answers to you in the scoping study itself. Send them to peter@nwrcommunications.com.au and we'll make sure they get to the right place. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. Thanks for your time today as well.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your time.